I'm marrying the woman who'll finally let me support her, David said down on one knee in front of 30 of his tech investors and venture capital executives, his voice carrying across the rooftop lounge of the Austin hotel where his startup's Series B funding celebration was happening. She doesn't understand tech. She doesn't understand business. But she makes great dinners, and that's what really matters. The room erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter that comes from men who never questioned whether their assumptions about women are accurate, the kind of laughter that validates condescension as humor. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this story, because what happens next will absolutely destroy you. My name is Olivia Winters. I'm a technology entrepreneur, a software engineer, and someone who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. David and I met at a bar in San Francisco in 2019. I was there with colleagues from the venture capital firm where I was working as an analyst. He was there with other startup founders, celebrating their seed funding. He approached me because, he later told me, I looked approachable and he liked confident women who weren't threatening. That should have been my first warning sign. The fact that he experienced female confidence as a threat was something I should have processed more carefully. We started dating. He told me about his startup, Hartford Ventures, a software platform designed to streamline cloud infrastructure management. It was decent technology, not revolutionary, but solid. I listened to his pitch. I analyzed his business model. I saw the flaws in his go-to-market strategy, the issues with his pricing model, the problems with his technical architecture that would create scaling challenges. I offered suggestions. He dismissed every single one. You don't have the technical background to really understand this, he said, not unkindly, but with the kind of certainty that comes from never having been proven wrong by a woman before. What I lack in technical background, I make up for in financial modeling expertise, I responded. Your unit economics are going to collapse under your current pricing structure. That's why we have seasoned investors to advise us, he said. It was a dismissal dressed up as reassurance. Here's what David didn't know about me. I wasn't a venture capital analyst because I lacked the qualifications to do something else. I was a VC analyst because I wanted to understand the startup ecosystem from the inside before I started my own company. I was studying the psychology of founders, the patterns of successful investments, the way money flowed through Silicon Valley. I was essentially auditing a masterclass in venture capital while getting paid to do it. I was also building my own company in the evenings and on weekends. In 2018, 2 years before I met David, I'd started developing a software platform designed to make artificial intelligence accessible to non-technical business professionals. The technology was revolutionary. It allowed people without coding expertise to build complex AI models for their specific business needs. By the time I met David in 2019, I had an MVP, minimum viable product. By 2020, I had customers. By 2021, I had significant revenue. By 2022, I had raised series of funding from top-tier venture capital firms. By 2023, I had built something genuinely valuable. My company, Prometheus AI, valued at $340 million after series of funding, was growing 35% month over month. My software had over 8,000 paying customers. My team consisted of 127 people spread across San Francisco, Austin, and Singapore. I was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most successful female founders in the AI space. And David had no idea. He thought I was a mid-level VC analyst making around $180,000 a year. He thought my technical understanding was surface level. He thought I was someone he could support with his startup wealth, eventual wealth, that is, after his Series C and his exit and his inevitable success. He thought I was someone decorative, valuable primarily for my ability to make dinner and look good at his events. I let him think that. And I have no regrets about it. Here's why I kept my success private. I wanted to see how he treated me when he believed I was beneath him professionally. I wanted to understand whether his affection for me was based on genuine connection or on his fantasy of being the successful man in a relationship with a less accomplished woman. I wanted to know the truth about how he saw women, how he saw me. If he loved me, he would love me equally whether I made $180,000 or $180 million. If his love was conditional on his perception of my professional status, then his love wasn't really love at all. And what I learned was not encouraging. He made jokes about my career constantly. At dinner with his friends, he introduced me as my girlfriend who works in finance in a tone that suggested finance was something I dabbled in, a hobby before I settled down to be his wife. He suggested, repeatedly, that I should think about what comes next, meaning marriage and children and stepping away from work. He talked about how his success would allow me to finally relax, as if my work was stressful and unnecessary rather than fulfilling and lucrative. He positioned himself as the builder, the creator, the person doing real work, and me as the supporter, the audience, someone whose primary value was in reflecting back how impressive he was. He saw me as an acquisition, something that would complete his success narrative. He needed a woman who was beautiful and accomplished enough to be presentable, but not so accomplished that she would overshadow him. And I let him do it. Because I wanted to understand the extent of his delusion. I wanted to know exactly how much he underestimated me. In late 2023, I decided it was time to move forward with something I'd been planning, an acquisition strategy. My company, Prometheus AI, had the capital reserves to acquire smaller technology companies that would strengthen our technical capabilities and expand our market reach. Hartford Ventures, David's company, fit that profile perfectly. Their cloud infrastructure software would integrate beautifully with our AI platform. Their customer base would expand our reach into enterprise clients. And their founding team, while lacking vision and strategic thinking, included several excellent engineers. We were a natural fit. Which meant David's company was worth acquiring. I had my lawyers reach out to David's company without mentioning that I was involved. I had them present the acquisition as a generic strategic investment from a larger company. David would have no idea it was coming from me. No idea that the company he was so proud of was about to be absorbed into the company I'd built. For 6 months, we negotiated the acquisition. For 6 months, I sat across from David at dinner and listened to him talk about his company's prospects, never mentioning that my company was quietly acquiring it. For 6 months, I watched him plan our future as if it would be built on his success. And then he proposed. He proposed at his company's Series B celebration. The timing, in retrospect, was perfect. He'd just raised $45 million. He felt invincible. He felt successful. He felt ready to acquire a wife, and yes, that's how he thought of it, as an acquisition, something you purchase and add to your portfolio. And he wanted to do it publicly, in front of his investors, as if my acceptance of his proposal was one more victory to celebrate, one more thing he'd won. I'm marrying the woman who'll finally let me support her, he said, and the room laughed, and I said yes, and my phone buzzed with the message, acquisition approved. You are now the majority owner of Hartford Ventures. I didn't read the message until after he kissed me. When I did, I stepped away to the bathroom and called my lawyer. It's done? I asked. It's done. Announced publicly this morning. Hartford Ventures is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Prometheus AI. The news broke on TechCrunch 45 minutes ago. I came back to the party. David was showing off the engagement ring to his investors, basking in congratulations, already mentally planning the wedding where his girlfriend who didn't understand business would presumably be decorative in white while he was the center of attention. One of his investors, a woman named Patricia Chen, actually, who heads one of the largest VC firms in California, approached me at the bar. She looked at me with knowing recognition. She was smiling. Congratulations on the proposal, she said. And then, more quietly, and congratulations on the acquisition. I just saw the TechCrunch article. Hartford Ventures is part of Prometheus AI now. Your company just bought your fiancé's company. I smiled. How do you think he's going to take it? He's going to collapse, Patricia said. She looked almost gleeful. He built his entire identity on the assumption that you were less successful than him. That you needed him. That he was the builder and you were just there. And now his company is a subsidiary of yours. He just became an employee of a woman he mocked 5 minutes ago. I watched David across the room, still celebrating, still in the moment where he thought he understood the world and his place in it and my place in his life. I gave him another 10 minutes. Then I walked over and showed him the TechCrunch article on my phone. His face went through a series of transformations, confusion, then disbelief, then anger, then a dawning recognition of exactly how completely he'd misunderstood the situation. What is this?" he said. "It's the news that you've been acquired," I said quietly. "Prometheus AI, that's my company, David. The one I've been building for the past 5 years. The one that just closed series of funding. The one valued at $340 million. That company just bought your company for $87 million. He stared at me. Actually stared. The color drained from his face. Around us, the party continued, but I watched him process the implications. His company was no longer his. He was now an employee of the company I owned. His success was now dependent on my decisions. The power dynamic in our relationship had just inverted completely, and publicly, in front of 30 of his investors, most of whom were probably already reading the TechCrunch article. You own Prometheus AI?" he said. "Majority stake, yes. I've been building it for 5 years. I've been the CEO since founding. I've raised series of funding. And about an hour ago, I acquired your company. Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was small. Shocked. "Because I wanted to see how you treated me when you thought I was beneath you professionally. Because I wanted to know the truth about how you saw me. And I got my answer." The engagement ended 2 weeks later. He tried to convince me that he'd meant well, that the mockery was just humor, that he'd supported me really, he just expressed it in a certain way. But the truth was that he'd built his entire vision of our relationship on a fiction, that he was the builder and I was the decorative element. That his success mattered and mine didn't. That I was someone he would support, not someone who would challenge him as an equal. The acquisition closed. Hartford Ventures became Prometheus AI's cloud infrastructure division. David is now VP of infrastructure under my CTO. He works for a woman he mocked in front of 30 investors. His startup, which he believed was his path to wealth and status, is now a division of a larger company that I own. Sometimes he looks at me during meetings with an expression somewhere between regret and resentment. I understand. He came to realize that his most fundamental assumptions about me were wrong. He built a narrative in which he was successful and I was not, and then watched that narrative collapse the moment I decided it was time. What I learned from David is that underestimation can be a powerful strategic advantage. When people don't take you seriously, when they assume you're less capable than you are, you have the freedom to build quietly, to operate without scrutiny, to achieve things they didn't know were possible. And when the moment is right, when you're ready to reveal the truth, the shock of it is so complete that they never recover their footing. David proposed to the person he thought I was. Then he discovered who I actually am. That's a jarring experience for anyone, but it's just particularly jarring when it happens in front of your investors and ends up on the front page of TechCrunch. The engagement ended 2 weeks after the acquisition closed. He tried to convince me that he'd meant well, that the mockery was just humor, that he genuinely supported my career, he just expressed it in a certain way. He suggested that we could work through this, that he'd change, that we could still make it work. But the fundamental problem was that his love for me was conditional. It was based on his perception of my status relative to his status. He didn't love me as an equal, he loved me as an accessory to his success. The moment I became more successful than him, the moment I became his boss instead of his cheerleader, he couldn't reconcile that with his identity. Hartford Ventures became Prometheus AI's cloud infrastructure division. David is now VP of infrastructure under my CTO. He works for a woman he mocked in front of 30 investors. His startup, which he believed was his path to wealth and status and independence, is now a division of a larger company that I own and control. He makes a good salary, much better than his base salary before, actually, but he's no longer the founder. He's no longer the visionary. He's just the person who had a decent technical idea but lacked the business acumen to execute it successfully. Sometimes he looks at me during meetings with an expression somewhere between regret and resentment. I understand that expression. He came to realize that his most fundamental assumptions about me were wrong. He constructed an entire narrative in which he was successful and I was not, and then watched that narrative collapse the moment I decided it was time to reveal the truth. My name is Olivia Winters. I'm the founder and CEO of Prometheus AI, a company valued at $340 million that just acquired Hartford Ventures. When my fiancé proposed to me while mocking my career, he didn't know that I was building something he couldn't comprehend. He didn't know that my surface-level financial understanding was more sophisticated than his business model. He didn't know that I was studying him like he was a case study in male delusion. When my lawyer called to tell me the acquisition was complete, I was standing next to him as he celebrated his Series B funding. When I showed him the TechCrunch article, he finally understood that the woman he'd been mocking was the woman who now owned his company. That's the difference between arrogance and actual power. Arrogance is loud. Actual power is quiet, until the moment it reveals itself. And then everything changes.